Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Wyoming Watch. It's our weekly news podcast here at the Wyoming Tribune-Eagle. On this show, we'll be bringing you an in-depth news package each week, as well as a list of upcoming things to do in the area and a recap of our top stories from the past 7 days. And I'm Noah Zahn, our state government reporter here. I'll be your host every week. And if you're a regular listener of the Perch, the Wyoming Watch is simply a rebranding of this podcast's original name, the Perch. However, it'll still be the same news content and podcast format that we're bringing to you every week, just under a different name. Now, let's get into this week's show. Over the past several weeks, the Cheyenne City Council has been discussing what to do with the pump house. Located near the corner of Ames Avenue and West Lincoln Way in Cheyenne's West Edge downtown, the pump house was constructed 133 years ago in 1892 to service the water needs of a growing Cheyenne community. When it was in commission, the pump produced 2 million gallons of water per day and pressurized the fire hydrants in town to 100 psi. However, it has been out of commission since 1920 and has since fallen into disrepair as a result of neglected maintenance. Now, the city of Cheyenne, which owns the property, has 3 primary options of how to move forward. They could mothball the structure for $1 million, restore it for $4 million and lease it out to local tenants, or the third option, sell it to a buyer on the condition that the buyer maintains its historical integrity. So this week on the first episode of the Wyoming Watch, we took the microphone on a tour of the pump house along with some local stakeholders and elected officials. Before we entered the building, Randy Byers, the principal architect with the design firm TDSI, spoke briefly about the exterior of the pump house.
One of the interesting things about, and we have contractors and other architects here so they can attest to this, one of the interesting things about masonry buildings, and this is, so it's brick on the inside and stone on the outside, they tend to be very brittle, right? And in a concrete block building, for example, a lot of times you'll see a stair step crack because of movement. We don't have any. This building sits next to the creek and next to the railroad. It's 133 years old now and has been ignored for 100 years. And the masonry on it is better than some of our newer buildings. So it's, you'll see, it's pretty amazing.
After that, we started to get into the building, and Stephanie Lowe, who is the president of the nonprofit Historic Cheyenne, Inc., shared a little bit more about what we were looking at on the inside.
This room is really unique. You can look around and still see there's some wood wainscoting, and then the windows still have the original trim. So this room and then the south half where it's darker, actually I believe there was a wall separating these two spaces, and that south half is where the boilers were located. And this may have been part of the residence, but it definitely was part of that public space because the finishes are a lot higher than what they are in the south half of the building.
Then those touring the pump house began to wander around the building, either in groups or individually. And inside of the building, it felt much more spacious than it looked from the outside. As people roamed the building, you could hear the wood creak as people walked up the stairs, chatter between people about the history of the structure, and even you could hear the crunch under people's feet as they walked over debris and shattered glass. And looking around, you could see overgrown weeds on the outside and the exterior of the building. You could see old trash lining the ground on the inside, particularly on the second floor, and even graffiti with some illegible markings and some carefully crafted murals. As we explored the building, I spoke with Maren Collis, who is the vice president of Historic Cheyenne, Inc. Before we made our way over to the pump house, she had just given an hour-long presentation to some members of the Cheyenne City Council at the municipal building, which in the presentation she included stories of the 3 separate pump house engineers who worked and lived with their families inside of the facility. Here's Maren now. Can you tell me a bit about this building and why it's worth saving?
Well, This building is connected to the origin story of this community. It represents the water from Crow Creek, which was necessary to feed the massive steam engines that needed to go over Laramie Pass. So we've got two things, the Union Pacific Railroad and then water. That's why Cheyenne's here. Okay. So this structure is the only remaining civic structure left that speaks to that origin story of water and why Cheyenne is on the map.
And, having this tour here today, there's elected officials and city staff and members of the media, I guess. What is the hope of this tour? Are you hoping that it changes people's minds, or are there things in specific you want them to see?
I think that being on site is really crucial to just understanding the challenges involved as well as the opportunities. I hope today that members of the governing body can see its potential and choose to not surplus it just yet. If that is their intention. I think that this building was built for the public. It belongs to the public. I don't think it was built for the public. It was built for the public, and I think that the public should have a say in what happens to it. And I think that bringing the governing body to this space is going to maybe help them get behind the momentum that we're building to bring greater awareness to the community of Cheyenne about this structure that is so important to our identity, and this really is the last opportunity we're going to have to save it.
And do you have any concern that bringing people here and the media and the public seeing pictures of it may discourage them seeing the shape that it's in? I know I've heard Randy speak at other meetings about how it's actually pretty structurally sound, but do you have any concern that this could backfire, I suppose?
Oh, sure. There's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be the haters. That's what their job is. And they have valid points as well. It is going to take $4 million, and there's no going around that. So is it worth it? Is it worth investing in the future of this? For future generations, I think it's worth it. But of course, that's my view. So I think any amount of press is good press.
Great. Well, that's about all I had. Is there anything else that you want to say about the building or the story here?
Yeah, you can see the original woodwork here for the residents, for Andy Artis and his family. Like this has been here for 133 years. That wainscoting is totally original. Mm-hmm. Those windowsills, like all of this, there's so much that's still here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As some members of the group began to make their way back outside and to their cars, I grabbed Cheyenne City Council member Ken Escobar to ask him some questions about how he felt about the tour and how he thinks the city should proceed going forward. I think at the last city council meeting you were supportive of selling it off and citing some of the other West Edge development business success stories as a reason for that, why that would work. Is that correct?
Yeah, I thought that was worth at least exploring as an option to see what's out there. We don't know what type of developer or somebody that has a business plan that this building might suit. I think Dr. Aldrich had mentioned there were some companies that were interested in it that had distilleries or breweries, type of thing like what we did with the old Pioneer Printing Building, which is now Blacktooth Brewery.
Yeah.
So you can go in that brewery and still see some of where the original Pioneer Printing logos were up on the roofs and walls of that building. Mm-hmm. Of course, this one would take a lot more investment. I'd like to see what the market analysis is going to tell us.
Okay.
But I also would favor seeing what the taxpayers think about this being a six-penny project. Mm-hmm. And then if that fails, I think that the city probably should just dip into reserves and finish it off and maybe make it part of our Parks and Recreation department, and put maybe the Greenway offices in here, maybe Clean Safe. So there's still multiple factors that we can explore.
Yeah, so your sense is maybe you just kind of put it on the market now and see if that option's there, and if not, sixpenny, and if not, the last resort, or the city should step in, at least. Okay. And touring this here today, is this changed your mind or your perspective on how you see things going forward? I'm not sure the last time or if you've ever been in this building.
Yeah, I did come in here with my son, who's a certified structural engineer, and he pointed out things about the building that a normal person would probably not see, because of his education in structures, and he believed that it had what they say, good bones.
Yeah.
And that what I've heard is that the stones that are reminiscent of both this and the Union Pacific Depot are still available for us to get. So, my vision is of having it completely restored, even possibly doing something to put up the original smokestack still. It would be non-operating, but for the visual aspects of the history of the pump house, to show that as well. So, I see a lot of other cities, they do things like this with some of their historic buildings, and Cheyenne really doesn't, make that investment. I think other states have different tax structures than what we do here, so they probably have additional funds available to them that we don't.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, your other elected officials are leaving right now, do you think this has kind of changed some of their minds seeing the state of this building, or do you think the discussion, whenever it comes before the city council again, will look different after this versus what it was last time?
No, this has always been a council goal, and I think we're all committed to it 100%. It's just what's the direction that we're going to go to get to the end game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's all I had for you. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, I think 10 years down the road, if we could come back and look at it, it's going to be a whole different building.
On Tuesday, the Cheyenne City Council's Finance Committee will discuss the potential sale of the pump house. And on the following Monday, July 14th, the governing body will make a final decision on how to proceed. That's all for our main story this week. Now, here's our arts and entertainment reporter, Taylor Staples, to bring you a roundup of some events coming up in Cheyenne and Laramie County this week.
Kicking off Friday, July 4th, there's a firecracker 5K, 10K beginning at 7:30 a.m. at the Cheyenne Depot Plaza. And then the 4th of July celebration begins at 9:35 p.m. You can watch the fireworks from Lions Park or any nearby neighborhoods. On Saturday, July 5th, you can watch the Gunslingers perform at 15th Street and Pioneer Avenue at noon. Enjoy one of the Quebec 01 tours leaving from the depot at 10:30 a.m. or pass by Cheyenne Cruise Night starting at 5 p.m. at Central Avenue and 24th Street. On Monday, July 7th, there's a Tough Trees for Wyoming meeting and picnic walk at the High Plains Arboretum from 10 a.m. to noon. Also, there's a jewelry making class at the library from 3:30 to 5 p.m. And the Walking Fitness series with Ralph Tamir continues from 6 to 7 p.m. at Performance Park outside of the library. On Tuesday, July 8th, the Cheyenne Women's Connection is holding a meeting on Miss Frontier 1979 from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. at the Cheyenne Frontier Days Old West Museum. And a colorful carnival magic show with Kyle Groves will take place at the library from 10:15 to 11 a.m. On Wednesday, July 9th, this is the first day of the Wyoming International Film Festival, which goes through Sunday at various times throughout the weekend at Laramie County Community College. Then another session of the Walking Fitness series with Ralph Tamir goes from 9 to 10 a.m. at Performance Park. And also at the library, there will be 2 Brushes and Bites Color Our World sessions from 1 to 3 p.m. and then again from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Finally, on Thursday, July 10th, the Wyoming's kickoff to America's 250th celebration begins at noon and goes until 8 p.m. at the Wyoming State Capitol building in Capitol Square. Then, the Cheyenne Neighborhood Night starts at 5 p.m. at the Cheyenne Police Department. And also, the Cheyenne Creativity Center will hold an alternative photography Van Dyke process session from 5:30 to 8 p.m. Later, the Wyoming State Archives series centered around mountain men begins at 7 p.m. at the Wyoming Capitol Extension Auditorium. And finally, the 69th old-fashioned melodrama titled Chicken Pot Pie or The Flaky Fowl Fakery or Your Goose Has Been Cooked starts at 7 p.m. at the Historic Atlas Theater.
And finally, before we close out today, here's a quick recap of some of our top stories and headlines from the past week. Thousands of Wyomingites of all political parties gathered across the state last Thursday evening, including around 500 in Cheyenne, to protest the proposed sale of public lands supported by Wyoming Senators John Barrasso and Cynthia Lummis. Tension continues to mount as Cheyenne City Council members prepare to vote on the next phase of the proposed $5 million 15th Street railcar experience, which would entail revitalizing 2 rail cars and a caboose to be put on display on West 15th Street as a tourist attraction. This week, several elected officials held a news conference on 15th Street to discuss their reasoning for opposing the plan. The new horse track at Thunder Plains will not operate this year after several factors have delayed construction of Laramie County's only live horse racing track. Cowboy Racing, the park's operator, was initially set to complete construction this year and begin hosting live events in the early fall. Now they're hoping they can have everything set up to go by next year. Wyoming officials say the cowboy state stands to lose more than $24.5 million after the Trump administration withheld more than $6 billion in funds supporting various education programs earlier this week. After 2 hours of heated discussion and multiple statements of disbelief and sadness from board members, the Laramie County School District 1 Board of Trustees voted Monday night to approve a new concealed carry policy one day before a new state law repealing gun-free zones took effect. That's all for this inaugural episode of the Wyoming Watch, and be sure to like and share if you enjoyed the episode, and as always, feel free to reach out anytime to news@wyomingnews.com to send us comments or tips for this show. And even though it's a new name, we still want to serve the same goal of being able to share our news content in a free and accessible format to new and existing audiences. Thank you for supporting the Perch for almost a year, and hope you'll stick around with us through this rebranding under the Wyoming Watch. And as always, be sure to check back every Friday for new episodes.